Welcome to 5 Good Minutes.
You're listening to today's inspirational message on the book of Esther
with Kurt Bjorklund.
One of the unavoidable issues that we see in Esther chapter 6 is the pride of Haman and how he is brought low. And again, this counters or doesn't counter it. It illustrates really something that we see in the Bible over and over again. In 1 Peter chapter 5, we see this. It says, "Humble yourselves," this is verse 6, "therefore under the mighty hand of God, so that at the proper time he may exalt you, casting all of your anxieties on him because he cares for you." And right before that, in verse 5, it says, "Likewise, you who are younger, be subject to the elders, clothe yourselves, all of you, with humility toward one another." And it says this, "For God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble." And I know this has been explored a little bit in this study already, but I was looking at this and thinking about humility and pride. And if humility is something that God is gracious toward and pride is something he opposes, then I definitely want to choose humility over pride. So these are just some ways to think about this, not necessarily rooted in this text, although certainly you could dig into this text and probably find it. But here are just a few things that are probably true about humility and pride. Humility is being big enough to admit when I'm wrong, whereas self-promotion won't admit it. It won't concede an issue. It will always want to fight a point. So are you so proud that you won't admit when you're wrong or concede a point? Humility is able to rejoice at other people's success, or is able to let other people's achievement stand without one-upmanship. Whereas self-promotion is always in competition, and it needs to always be seen as having done something better than somebody else. You know how this one-upmanship works. It's like, oh, that's great that you had that vacation, but I did this vacation. Or it's great that you got that for that price. I got it for even a lower price. Oh, it's great that your kid had that success. My kid had this success. Humility is able to rejoice in other people's success or let somebody's achievement stand without one-upmanship. I think humility is content to play second chair, meaning it doesn't have to always be in charge or recognized as being up top. It can be in a support role. Humility is not miffed when it's unconsulted or unrecognized. In other words, it's able to say, you don't need to recognize my contribution. You don't need to appreciate how I've somehow helped you. And humility is not overcome by humiliation, criticism, or mistreatment. In other words, when mistreated, when you feel miffed or somehow humiliated, it doesn't hold that grudge. And then humility is not engaged in self-promotion. Well, it doesn't mean self-abasement, but it means that there is a sense in which when you're humble, you don't feel the need to keep putting yourself forward. And ultimately, humility recognizes its ultimate need for God. I think it was C.S. Lewis, but could have been somebody else, who said that humility is not thinking less of yourself, but it's thinking of yourself less. Meaning, it isn't trying to make yourself something that isn't who God made you to be with gifts and talents, but it is basically being at a point where you are not always so filled with thoughts of yourself that you're always on a scale. So humility is tricky, because the more you try to assess yourself and think of yourself and think you've done any of the things that we just talked about, the more likely you are to be prideful. And the story of Haman, the story of him puffing himself up and then being taken low, is just a reminder that God gives grace to the humble, but he opposes the proud. Charles Spurgeon once said it this way: humility must be in the heart. Then it will come out, and spontaneously as the outflow of life in every act that a man performs. But when humility is something that we're trying to put on and do, not in the heart, then it doesn't just spill out. Instead, it's something that is an attempt to say now God has to exalt me because I've humbled myself, which can be in its own false way an act of pride. So today, my encouragement to you is just to humbly go to God and say, God, I want to think of myself less, and I want to think more of others, more of you, be more like Christ in this way, rather than being about myself.
Thanks for joining us here today. There's a lot of great content to explore on Orchard Hill Plus and on the Orchard Hill main feed from the weekend. Have a great day.